Welcome to Between Sundays. I'm Tyler, and as I always say, anyone can get blasted by a water cannon. Why should you get the credit for it? Today we're talking about how we love our enemies, but before we find the third way, now that they've gone from couch potatoes to marathon athletes, let's give all the chorus to our favorite hamartolosis. Amy and Barry, good day, guys.
Good day.
I don't even know what you just said.
Lots of references.
Yes, so many.
Is hamartolosis the plural of hamartolos?
It would probably be hamartoloi.
Lie.
Oh.
But I'd need to look that up, and
Yeah.
I don't know Greek,
Hamartolosis.
so don't at me. I don't actually know Greek, so
Yeah. Giving all the credit to the sinners.
yeah, let's go.
Guys, what's new? What's happening?
Oh, Grace Kids Camp.
Yeah, I'm sitting here with a couple bumps on the log.
No, we're not
Yeah.
bumps. We're just tired.
Nope. No bumps here.
Yeah.
I am leading a small group of 5th grade boys. So
Yeah.
it's
You're a grown-up boy.
Yeah, they are grown-up boys. I was just telling Tyler before this that 5th grade is such a unique. I think 4th grade is the sweet spot because they're like still kids. They're still goofy and they're fun and they have interests, but they're not yet on the cusp of middle school.
Yeah.
5th grade, you've got some kids that are a little too cool for school who just want to sit and not participate, or like if the game seems a little too
Yeah.
childish, they'll kind of like put up their hood and just like walk off. And I don't know. And I didn't have a co-leader for half the day, so I was kind of flying
You're
solo.
by yourself.
Yeah, but it worked out. It was all fine.
That's fun.
Yeah, we had a good time. And Liv is doing one of the girls' 5th grade small
grade.
groups, so it's just fun to be on the same kind of wing.
There are
Same team. You're on the same team.
Yes.
there are a ton of kids
Yes.
here.
Yeah, lots.
And I always forget how noisy it is.
hmm
Yeah,
It's very noisy.
constant din.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lose my voice by the end of the week.
Yeah.
I think I've already lost mine, kind of. I
Because-
feel like
Every group needs like its own chant.
Mhm.
Every group has its own chant. And
yes.
it's like you're heading to snacks. It's like, what do we want? Snacks. When do we want it now?
Oh, yeah. I know.
It's-
It's the high school to college age guys that are
Yeah.
leading groups.
Yeah.
They get them all going.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I think I sound incredibly like I've got a low voice. It feels like it might be an octave lower today. Because I had to
Good
be
radio voice.
well, sure. I had to be here at 7:30. I know that you know how much I love
Yeah.
mornings, so it was a pretty rough go. But I'm directing the drama, so we have to get here early to do a run through and all the things, and it's fun. It's fun.
My 6-year-old Milo is doing kids camp for the first time. He's like a participant. He's a camper. And I saw him and I went to go give him a high five. And so I like stuck my hand out like this and he put his hand out to shake my hand.
What?
He's all business.
It's like the first step of like being severely embarrassed by your parent.
Yeah,
I
he's
feel
like,
like
"Dad,
he's
I'm
like,
not
I don't
doing
want to be seen high-fiving my dad. I'm going to shake his hand.
He's a business. He's all business.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
All business.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fun. It's going to be a fun week. Maggie's group, she's leading 3rd grade, and she's got boys and girls in her group. And the one little boy was like, "I really wish you were a guy."
Yeah. I
He
wanted
really
a boy
wanted.
leader.
He wanted a guy leader, and Maggie's
funny.
like, "I'm really sorry, but I have a low voice like my mom, so
Yeah.
I kind of sound like a boy."
Yeah.
That's what she told him.
Yeah.
I invented a greeting for the guys in my group for each other, kind of like a secret handshake where we grasp each other's forearms like an ancient Roman like handshake.
Oh, I
and
bet
say-
they latched
and
right
say-
onto that
We
ancient
do
Roman
that. Oh,
reference.
they love that. It fit me to be nerdy and stuff. So,
Yeah.
and we do that, and then we say brother. So that's how we greet. They love it. I knew that they would, and they did. So
That's hilarious.
they always get a big smile on their. I always go brother, and then they smile and put out their hand, and I'm like, yeah, we're good. We're
But
in.
they've got to grab the forearm.
yeah,
not
yeah.
The hand.
Check for knives and stuff. I don't know.
That's fun. That's really fun. I love it.
Yeah. What else is new? What's going on in your lives?
Barry, you're gonna have to take this one to start.
I am I see the light at the end of the tunnel for my insane overcommitment of writing
Yeah.
stuff like I was talking about before. I
God ruled.
yeah, God's the only one who's getting me through it. But I'm on week 4 of my Revelation class and week 4 of preaching 4 weeks in a row this Wednesday and Sunday respectively. So I'm
and then Monday, I assume, are you off next week?
no, but whatever Juneteenth, whenever
Yeah,
that is.
yeah, that's
Is that next
Wednesday.
week?
Yeah,
So I'm
it's
taking
a week
like
from
I'm
Wednesday.
taking like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off.
Yeah.
Because yeah, I'm exhausted. So But I'm excited. The Revelation class has gone really well. I feel like the sermon series has been well received. People keep saying the word timely. So, yeah. So, so it's all good. And I'm glad I'm doing Grace Kids Camp despite being busy. It's good. But this is kind of my entire life is consumed with
Grace Church.
Grace
right
Church. Everything Grace.
Every waking moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot. What did I don't even, I did.
You hurt your back at Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah. It was from the standing. I don't think I can stand anymore. I think
That's too bad.
it's like my lower back. There's a lot that comes with aging.
Yeah.
It's fine. I was in Nashville for a couple of days.
Doing what?
Nashville, Tennessee last week.
CMA Fest?
You know what? I didn't know that was happening. It was crazy down there. Yeah. Yes, it was. So I didn't know that was happening. Jeff was down there for business. And so I was like, oh, well, I love Nashville. Our anniversary's this week. So I went down and we spent a couple of nights down there and it was fun. It's a fun city. I like Nashville.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. 31 years on Wednesday.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a long time.
That is a very
Long time. More than half my life.
Don't act like you're a big shot.
I mean, I am kind of a little bit. I'm a big shot. 35 if you count the 4 years we dated, which I definitely count. So
Oh, you do as part of your marriage?
not part of our marriage, but part of being together.
Yeah.
I mean, like we've
4
been together,
years. That's a long time.
and we've been together a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Since you were
So,
wee babes.
yeah, I was a baby. So,
Yeah.
what about you?
Guys, I am in the market, if you know anyone, for coyote urine.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a new car.
Well, that too.
That too.
But
Are you-
coyote urine.
Why?
Maybe if you get both in one, you can really save some money on that car.
Yeah.
You're gonna, you're gonna get some kind of email or text after this. And
Yeah.
someone's gonna be like, "I've
I'm a
got
supplier.
coyote
I'm a
Anybody's got
supplier.
coyote urine.
in my car."
I need some.
Do you want to explain why?
Please.
Because, well, from what I've read, it repels critters.
Everyone on the planet.
No, we have tons of chipmunks in our
Oh,
yard,
Are they? Yeah.
and there's just holes all over our yard where there are
Sure.
tunnels, whatever.
Mhm.
We have a
Wait,
raccoon problem.
They do. I thought gophers did the tunnels. Chipmunks do
Chipmunks
too.
do too, yeah.
Oh,
So do moles. Lots of
Okay.
tunneling.
So we have rabbits and raccoons and chipmunks all throughout our yard.
it's like your Snow White. She had all
Yeah,
those
it's
animals,
exactly
but they
like
helped
Snow
her clean
White.
the house.
Lauren and I walked outside the other day, and we counted like 11 squirrels in the same tree.
Wow.
It's just
Aw.
it's not pleasant.
Okay.
It sounds a lot better than what it is because I was mowing the grass the other day, and we don't have a dog, so part of the not having a dog's like, oh, we don't have to like pick up its poop in the yard or whatever.
Oh.
But there's raccoon poop in the yard
Yeah.
now, so we gotta
Oh, wow.
deal with that. So as I was reading of ways to repel and get them out of the yard is you just spray coyote urine or like
Mhm.
predator urine so that they don't come.
Well, that
around
sounds
anymore.
lovely.
Instinct.
I want my children playing in a yard filled with coyote urine.
No, you don't like douse your yard. You just spray like specific spots where you think they might be.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
keep the kids away from those spots.
Lauren yesterday was out in the yard just sprinkling like cayenne pepper in the, in the chipmunk holes.
Was she like trying to punish them by
Yeah, because she's trying to set up like a nature something. She's got like a bird feeder out there, bird bath with the solar
Mm.
fountain in the middle
Yeah.
of it, and the chipmunks and squirrels keep hijacking everything. So she's
Yeah.
like spreading cayenne pepper throughout her yard.
What if they're like, ooh, that's tasty?
Yeah.
Then they're just coming back for more.
Yeah,
Just get a dog. Just get a dog.
the
And
dog will
I
scare them
know.
away.
Yeah. Or
Well, your
chase them.
kids-
Well, it depends on the dog. I don't know if Judy would have scared
Yeah,
Yeah,
anybody
Judy
away.
would have been out there like, hey, enough, everybody. I'm pretty tired.
Yeah,
Just got to be careful because, like the other day, maybe a few weeks ago, Cleo, middle of the night, freaking out and was like barking, was trying to get out, and so I was like, all right, whatever, or not barking. She was just acting like she needed to get outside. So I finally opened the door to the bedroom, and she just goes tearing off into the night.
Oh,
And I was like, oh no, that's not good. Like she shouldn't be that.
Right.
So I run out after her barefoot, and she's chasing a raccoon that was eating the bird feeder on our porch.
Oh.
So she's out there chasing this raccoon around a tree, growling. I get to her just in time for her to get bit on the face by the raccoon.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Did you have
so-
to take her into the vet then?
No, we yes, I did the next day to get
Because
a rabies
right?
booster. She already
Yeah.
had a rabies.
Okay, yeah.
She gets all the things, flea and tick and rabies and
Okay,
everything.
I
'cause
would-
she
yeah.
lives in the
Because she lives in,
woods.
yes.
Or
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway.
It
So
Yeah,
kind-
you don't want to get bit by.
you don't want
raccoon.
that, but
Yeah.
the squirrels do steer clear for the most part. So
Yeah.
you never know.
And your kids want a dog, so there.
Win-win.
I mean, Lou doesn't know. She doesn't know the difference.
She
If
was
you
a
guys
dog.
only knew how much we have to talk about why we don't have a dog.
Because your kids talk to you about it every day.
My wife, it actually the best possible thing happened this past weekend. My wife is like, she goes on Love Pet Project
Mm.
a lot,
Mhm.
which is a organization that I think adopts out dogs that
Yeah.
have like
I think they were here for our Creation Fest.
last
think
year
that-
maybe.
I thought they were here this year.
But she over the weekend was like, "Look, there's a golden retriever. Should we just go get it?" And I was like, "No, we've talked about this." And she's like, "Your kids would love it. Your kids would. They just want a dog so bad."
Pause,
And within
look at this picture real quick. This is Milo and Cleo. I mean, this is what we're dealing
Yeah.
with here.
I know.
You just need that.
Show
get
the
that kid
camera.
Get the.
Yeah, sure.
Is this gonna work? I don't know if this
I don't know.
Probably.
Show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go.
I'm,
All right. So
I'm going to tell you, your impression of Lauren isn't bad.
see,
Like I could hear her. I could totally hear her saying that.
Yeah,
sorry,
so she's
I
like-
interrupted you. So
she's
go
like,
ahead.
"This will bring your kids so much joy.
Yeah.
They want a dog so bad." And within 6 minutes, both Milo and Lane walk up, and she goes, "Guys, don't you want a dog?" And one at a time, they're like, "No."
Mm.
One at a time, and they're like, "Come on, tell your dad that you want a dog, right?" I'm like, "No." And I said, "Would you, if we got a dog, would you help with it?" No.
Yeah.
So like,
Wow.
If they already
It's off the
know that,
table.
yeah, they
Yeah,
are
yeah,
definitely
yeah.
not
Off the
helping.
table.
Because most of the time, kids are like, "Yes,
course
I
I
will
will.
help. I will do everything."
I was like,
And
you're not a very good salesman.
Yeah, the dog's pooping all over the house, and
Yeah.
the kids are laying in front of the TV. So
Yeah.
if your kids are saying they're
Yeah.
not going to help, then they're not going to help.
Yeah. So
Why don't you just send them? You've got Hannah and Ben right down the street. They've got dogs. Just
That's
bring
what
their
I said.
dogs over for a little
that's
bit.
what I said.
They might scare away everybody. Then you don't have to deal with that coyote urine because that sounds horrible.
Well, I think it's just like a little bit.
I'm just going to say I wouldn't even want to put it in my car to transport it.
You can buy it. I'm tomorrow. I'm gonna go buy some
Can you get
Where?
it on Amazon?
Yeah, I was going to say
No,
have it
like-
delivered.
at like Cabela's.
Ah.
Huh.
Okay. Well, have
I'll keep
fun
you
with
posted.
that. Yeah. let
I'm
us know.
going to look on Amazon for you. I think
Okay,
you should
thanks.
have it delivered to your house because I think it sounds gross to have it transported.
Yeah. All right. Week 2 of our sermon series.
Yeah.
I just don't think we're
Undivided.
very interesting this week.
Well,
I don't know the fact that we have
Friends
to
of the
talk
po-
about
what,
coyote
come
urine.
up with better stories.
Feels like they're like
Anecdotes.
We can
wow,
talk
they-
about
they are tired.
we can
We
talk about
we
Maggie's
can talk about
eye.
your lower back.
That was very interesting. I think that was riveting. Okay, no, let's talk about the message.
All right. So week number 2, undivided sermon series about loving our enemies. Barry, you gave the sermon, so
I
please
did.
share kind of the big idea, what you wanted people to walk away with from this past weekend.
Yeah. So just to give some context for those who are kind of catching back up with everything, we are in the week 2 of 5. We're looking at a specific passage of scripture, basically Luke chapter 6, starting in verse, I think 26 or 7, all the way through the end of the chapter. And it's basically where Jesus is saying his most provocative teaching about love your enemies and do good to those who hate you, etc. And so we are kind of going verse by verse through this passage and exploring just some of the different implications of what that might mean if we were to actually take Jesus seriously. And so week 1 last week was out kind of the intro to the concept of this. What is an enemy? What does it mean to practice what I called redemptive non-retribution? Like what does this look like to actually love an enemy? What is Jesus actually saying? And then this week was the beginning of me trying to answer the question, how? Like, how
Yeah.
do we actually do this? And the way I described it is that this week,
How is this going to happen?
there you go. That's a good one. This week, it's how, from a high level view, like what's the basic concept that, how do we become the kinds of people for whom this is the kind of ordinary behavior of loving our enemies? And then next week, it'll be a lot more specific. How, like, give me some practical examples, practical tools that we can take
Yeah.
with the right posture. So this one is all about the broad level of how. And I mean, put simply, the answer is kind of almost ridiculously
Try.
simple. No, it's practice.
Yeah.
It's like you have to actually train for it. It won't just happen. And I use the metaphor of a couch potato being asked to run a marathon. If you've never done the work, if you're not active, if you're not eating well, drinking water, running a lot, like
Yeah.
there's just no chance that you're going to be able to run a marathon. And the same thing is true. If all you have is good intentions and you've never actually done the work to become Christ-like in any way, then why would you ever love your enemies? You're never
Right.
going to. It's impossible. So I talked about doing the work, doing the practice, doing the training. And essentially what that looks like for us is discipleship. It means like forming your life in all the different ways to be like Christ. Because when we do that, then we become the kinds of people for whom loving our enemies becomes more of a natural response, something that it would actually be odd for us to hate our enemies because we're becoming so much like Jesus in the way that we live. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we were, and we could get into the specifics, but that's basically what the passage is all about.
So you started the sermon and kind of kept the thread throughout the sermon of the Edmund Pettus Bridge journey from the civil rights
protesters.
movement.
Yeah.
What inspired you to use that kind of as the illustration?
Well, one of the I guess I would put it this way. When I started my journey as a Christ follower, I fell into the camp of assuming that loving your enemies was that kind of, it was Jesus kind of being extreme, well-wishing, like this is an impossible ideal that I want you guys to just try for if you can. When I was in seminary, though, I took a class on the theology and ethics of Martin Luther King Jr., and it really changed my perspective on loving your enemies, because he took these concepts very seriously and actually put them into practice and saw results because of them. And it convinced me, probably for the first time, oh, this isn't just theory. This isn't just some sort of idealism on Jesus's part. He actually wants us to do this. And it's not just because we're supposed to be like Jesus and that's why we have to do it. It's because this is what could actually change the world. If there are cycles of abuse and hate and patterns like that, then the only way to actually break that cycle is to do something that's extreme, like loving your enemies, like acting with nonviolence, with like not doing what comes naturally, but being different from the default. And so King and the protesters were such a good example of this, because not only did they actually see the results of their actions of loving their enemies and not responding, not retaliating, but they also were a great example of training. Like they actually did the work. They trained. I mentioned in the sermon that they would go, like in church buildings, they would actually get together and they'd practice being yelled at and shoved, and so that they could like get used to being in those high tension situations to know what their bodies would do, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so they were a good example of the whole process. And so it was kind of an obvious, I knew we needed to talk about it at some point in this series, because I think it's probably the most relevant modern day-ish example of this being put into practice. And we can see the results of it.
You just said the phrase different than the default.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain what you meant by that?
Sure. This is kind of more specifically to what Jesus is saying in the second part of the passage, where he talks about starting in verse 32. He talks about, if you only love those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners love those who love them, et cetera. If you do good to those who do good to you, et cetera. And so my point, what I think Jesus was trying to get across, is the idea that those kinds of actions, like loving your friends and hating your enemies, like that is the default. That's what everybody does. That's the natural thing. And so if that's all we're going to do is what's default, then we shouldn't expect anything in our world to change. Hating our enemies always will generate more hate, and violence generates more violence. And so if we're okay with the status quo, then we should just do what comes naturally. But if we want things to actually change, we have to do the hard work and be different from the default. That's what that's about.
Yeah. Something else about the Pettus Bridge story in the 60s is that 2 weeks later, they did the march again. And that time they ended up with like 25,000 people doing it. And they had the backs of the courts that said, this is legal. Nobody touched them.
Yeah, because the first time they got just beat up severely, didn't they?
Yeah. And then in a matter of months from the march of through the Pettus Bridge, the Civil Rights Act of 1965 was signed. So, as you said, they did change. They did change
Something
things.
did change.
Something did change. And that immediately made me wonder, like, okay, if that's true, what about like situations where loving one's enemies does not lead to change, or like change that we see in behavior or mindset or anything? How do we prevent ourselves from being like disillusioned or discouraged? Because like, if the goal is to see something change or the world change or whatever, how do we prevent ourselves from being bummed out when and if things don't change?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll let Amy answer.
I don't.
I've been talking a lot.
I think you just keep going. And I don't think you can expect change. And I don't think that should be the reason that you're doing it. I think you're doing it because that's what we're called to do as disciples of Jesus. And sometimes you set things up so someone else might see change down the road. Like you live in this way so that someone else might benefit from you. I don't think we should ever expect that we're going to benefit in this lifetime from some of the changes that we're trying to implement in whatever way we're trying to implement. If it's right and good and true and of Jesus, we just need to go forward, continuing to pursue that change and hoping that someday, even if we don't see it somewhere, someone down the line will see that change and it will impact them for the better and for good. And I think in our own hearts and souls, we will feel a change. We may not see visible change like Martin Luther King did. Well, and he didn't even. I mean, think about him.
Right.
Think about what he implemented that he never saw come to fruition.
Yeah.
But I would venture to say hundreds of thousands of people have been changed by the actions of him and what he spread. So I think we spread what we're supposed to spread around the world and in our lives and in our community, and hope and pray that someday somebody will see good come from that.
So it's less about like, so if I'm really upset at my neighbor
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know, they did something to my property or something that I don't like, and I'm like, that's my enemy. My goal shouldn't necessarily be to change the thing, the outcome, the behavior, the mindset. It's the goal is to represent Jesus to them so that they would remember that or something, like they would like be impacted by that example. Like what is the goal of loving our neighbors?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Or loving our
obviously-
enemies, sorry.
Yeah. I think obviously it would be amazing if they changed. And that's what we should be hoping for and praying for, that this brings an actual like reconciliation or peace or whatever. But I do think ultimately, and this is what we talk about next week, the point of all of this is that we are to be acting compassionate because our Father is compassionate. And to me, what that means is we need to begin thinking or acting towards the world in the way that God acts towards us. Like we are given incredible grace and mercy. And how wonderful is it that God doesn't give up the first time we fail or the first time we don't respond to that grace with transformation, right? We are constantly receiving his grace and his mercy, and he doesn't give up. He just keeps doing it. And so we are being invited to offer, and of course it's that's an impossibility, but it's something we can grow in, is continuing to offer people grace and compassion, even when they reject it, even when they don't want it or don't change. But the other thing I think, which kind of hinted at is or Amy, you were kind of saying, is that like, this is also a lifestyle. It's a lifetime thing. And when we all do it, when the church does it, it may or may not affect a single individual enemy that one person has. But if we all committed to it, it would transform the world, because, when we are all living this lifestyle of enemy love, then that's the kind of movement that becomes unstoppable, even if there are a few examples of people who don't respond.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at Martin Luther King and his life, I mean, it was him. He created, through this one man, a movement was created, and thousands of people joined his movement to make that change happen. And now I forget where I was going.
Thanks for the input.
They did.
We're keeping
Cut
that in.
that.
We're keeping that.
I know, for sure.
Let me guess. You were
Please
saying
guess.
you were saying that the movement is what transformed things, not the individual person.
Yes.
Is that it?
The movement.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. That's where I
Yeah.
was going
Yeah.
for sure.
So, as followers of Jesus, I see two risks with being different from the default.
Mm.
Do you say default or default?
Different from the default. I
Yeah.
said default.
I
But
think default is like the thing, but if you default on something, can't default be a noun or a verb?
Default on a loan. Yeah, I think who knows?
All
What's
right.
the answer? I
Different
don't know.
from the.
I bet you
You
can
say it
either way.
however your heart
You say
desires.
potato, I say potato.
That's right. So there's two risks.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot more, but I thought of two. If we're different from the default, I could see us as Christians isolating, or at least being perceived that we're isolating ourselves from society, or being perceived as like naive or out of touch or judgmental. So that's risk number one. If we are different from the default and we're loving our enemies instead of whatever the norm of society is, we're perceived as naive or isolating ourselves or out of touch or something like that. The second one, if we choose to be set apart, I could see us being perceived as people with like an attitude of superiority. So like you think you're better than me because you are nicer to people, when I have, I have personally experienced where I'm like, that's not the right thing to do. We need to, have compassion or whatever. And they're like, you think you're better than me type thing.
Right.
So how do we ensure that being different from the default doesn't lead to things like those things happening? How do we make sure that what we're doing doesn't tick people off even more? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, people love to be outraged, and they love going scorched earth. Like it's like a deeply gratifying, at least in a broken way, a deeply gratifying thing to see someone go off on someone else.
Yeah.
If you happen to agree with the person that's doing the going off. I've experienced it too, where people are like, why aren't you
Yeah.
getting, are you just going to sit there and take it? You're not going to
Yeah.
get them back for what they said. And like it, yeah. And yeah, it's just very, very difficult because you don't want people to feel like you're being like holier than thou or judgmental. But like at the same time, I don't know what to say in that circumstance, because it's like, well, I mean, Jesus definitely did want us to do this.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm sorry for trying to be like him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know what to,
I,
Go ahead.
well, I think it's it all is all fruits of the Spirit working together at once. And I think there's a level of humility with the way that you love your enemies that hopefully that will come through and be kind of crystallized for somebody too. And they won't see it as, I don't think of, I guess probably people did say about Martin Luther King
I was
that
just
he
gonna say
was
that.
holier than thou. And that he, even other people in the civil rights movement, I think they were mad at him because they were like, you think that this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do anything,
yeah,
you're
but
not
our
making-
enemies will never respond
Right.
without violence. You
Right,
have
exactly.
to push back.
Yeah,
and they
you
have,
have
to
to push
taste, get a taste of their own medicine, or they'll never change. And he said, that's not
not how I'm going to
that's
do
not how
it.
we're going to do it. That's right.
And I think that's part of maybe and I use this word very carefully because we are so far from being persecuted, really. But that might be part of it, is that doing the right thing is going to be misconstrued in people's eyes. And Jesus was misconstrued all the time. I'm sure, the way the Pharisees, were constantly, trying to slip him up and make him look bad. And I think that we will probably have people that are just like, we're going to make them actually angrier by turning the other cheek.
Yeah.
Right. Just one of Paul's most famous lines is, when we preach Christ crucified, or the crucified Messiah, the Jews are offended and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. And it's like, that the idea that our king would give his life for his enemies, that's such a nonsensical thing to believe that everybody's offended. Everybody's like, how could you believe that?
Yeah.
And so when we start to enact that, when we start to live out that same concept, we shouldn't be surprised when that's the response.
And
especially in a time like ours.
And people might actually end up hating you for it. And that is actually what I was going to say earlier.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
What I was going to say was the movement was so strong because so many people gathered around what he was preaching, Martin Luther King, that he was killed for it.
Right.
People were so scared that his movement was actually going to enact change, big change in the world that we lived in, that they ended up killing him for it.
Yeah.
So people are not going to like you necessarily because you are loving your enemies.
Yeah.
It seems like it should be the opposite. Like, you're doing the right thing. You're loving people that the world thinks you should hate. People should look at that and be like, what a great person. They're doing the right thing. And I think you could find that actually the opposite might happen.
Yeah.
There's a reason that to take, when you think of figures like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they're kind of held up against one another because one was advocating for pushing back and the other one was advocating for active nonviolence. You see that same duality come up in popular media all the time, like Professor X and Magneto. Like that's the exact same way. One
Who's
of them,
that, Amy?
you know who those are?
No, I have no idea.
X-Men?
But I'm
Yeah.
just gonna keep nodding my head
Yeah.
as if I do.
Magneto, who wanted the mutants to kind of be to go to war against the humans and become a separate people. And Professor X was all about trying to find a way to coexist. And that's why they fought each other and they had different groups and stuff like that.
Team Magneto.
Ooh.
Team Magneto.
You're on Team Magneto?
I'm totally lying.
Okay, all
I
right.
just said that.
There's other examples, and I'm blanking on all of them right now, but it shows up so often, and I just need to think for a second, and I'll come up with others. But you know of any others I'm thinking of? Not what I'm thinking of, but no. Okay.
But that was a good one.
If
I'd seen any of the movies,
if you knew what I was talking about,
yeah.
But it's the same kind. Of course, it's held up as like the fundamental, like what do you do when you're facing enemies? There are two choices, and because the third choice of just rolling over and being a doormat, nobody wants that choice. So it's either you fight back or you do something different that doesn't involve rolling over or fighting back.
Yeah.
The third way.
Yeah, third way.
I do struggle with this. I don't disagree with what we've talked about in the sermons or here. I don't disagree with it, but I do struggle with it because just talking about it, a lot of it seems, and people probably felt this way about MLK and probably about Jesus, but it seems very idealistic.
Right.
So one of my big questions is when or how do we discern whether we need to love our enemies or whether we need to turn some tables over? Because if we're expected to genuinely be different than the default or from the default, how do we address apparent failures of, I'm talking about like my personal feelings on enemies, the apparent failures of like self-identified Christians whose behavior doesn't reflect Christianity.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
Or transformation. My enemy isn't necessarily my next door neighbor or people spreading rumors about me. Like I can find ways. I have been able to find ways where it's like those types of people, they don't rob me of my joy. But my enemy is whoever says they believe in Jesus. But they're the ones that my non-Christian friends are all pointing their finger at, being like, that is exactly why I will never go to church. Because they perpetuate division and conflict themselves. And so actually somebody emailed me, friend of the pod emailed me this past weekend asking a similar question. Like, if somebody breaks into my house, they are my enemy and they're going to hurt my family. I'm going to flip some tables over on them. I'm not going to love them, so to speak. And so, yeah, how do we discern when to love our enemies and when to not?
Well, and I will say, when going along with what I think you were saying, because I think I struggle with this too, I feel like I'm much harsher on somebody in my life that is saying, I love Jesus and I follow Jesus, and everything they say or do is pretty much the polar opposite of everything Jesus would do. And therefore, I'm looking at my own children who, a few of them are like, I'm not totally cool with the church and with Christians, and this is why. And they're pointing out these people in my life. I have a much harder time turning the other cheek and being like, that's cool. Just keep misrepresenting Jesus and kind of wrecking it for all of us, than I do somebody that is like, I don't claim to know Jesus at all. I don't claim to follow anything that he says or does. So I'm just out here living my life, and I'm like, okay, cool. Can I introduce you to my friend Jesus?
Right.
Like I have a much better or easier time with that than I do. Is that kind of along the lines?
Yeah, it's like I don't know how to love that enemy
as opposed to the enemy that,
because I feel like I need to, like I said it, like I feel like I need to turn the tables over and flip them over and be like, this isn't the right way to live. Like, be more confrontational about that type of enemy than somebody who's just like spreading rumors about me or something.
Yeah. Well, a few thoughts. First of all, I know what you feel, and I feel the same thing when you see someone, especially who's misrepresenting the gospel.
Yeah.
You want to go, you want to flip tables, you want to get, but let's remember, what does hate breed? More hate. And so when we act out of hate, even if it's justified, so in our minds justified, then we shouldn't expect things to actually change. They're not going to. Name one time an internet brawl where people are posting on each other's walls has ever transformed someone's perspective or character. Never once in the history of the internet, right?
Yeah.
Maybe once in like 1994 with the first internet when someone was having a reasoned dialogue. So there's that. It like, even if it doesn't feel like there's any, even if it feels like the most justified thing in the world, we know the outcome of hate and rage and violence. It always leads to more hate and rage and violence. It just doesn't ever make things better. But we do have to balance that with the fact that, yes, Jesus is, of all the people he ever like condemns, it's the teachers of the religious law who are misrepresenting God's heart for the world. Those are the people that he is most frequently talking very harshly towards. So there is that we have to balance. And yet, he died for them too, right? So like, even, and then we have examples of like Nicodemus, where he has long conversations with one of those religious leaders where he's inviting him to change his mind. So it'd be very different if we read that Jesus never dined with the Pharisees or that he completely excluded them, didn't let them hang around his group. No, they were always around.
Yeah.
And I think implicitly the invitation is always there for them to follow him as well. And so even as he's condemning their stances and their legacy when it comes to the way that they're representing God's heart, he's always still, in my opinion, offering them a level of grace. And so, I think we have to balance those two things. And other than Jesus flipping tables in the temple, every other example I can think of when he comes face to face with the powers is the opposite.
Right.
And even then, like, let's remember, it was a symbolic action. He wasn't doing violence to people. He was flipping over tables that represented something corrupt that was actually keeping the poor from encountering God. So let's remember, he was doing it for a purpose, not just to get back at anybody. But like other examples, you see the guys come to take him away to get executed, and Peter whips out a sword and cuts off the slave's ear. And he puts the ear back on and says, knock it off. He's like, we're no more of this. So we have to think the whole picture. Even the ones that Jesus would condemn the most are still people that he's looking out for and willing to die for.
Yeah.
And so,
I guess the other thought too is that whole idea of the third way. We're inviting everyone to the third way.
Right.
And I guess in some respects, I could say those that are completely misrepresenting the gospel in Jesus are as lost in another way as those that just don't acknowledge Jesus at all. So what we're choosing is the hardest way, but the way that we're trying to draw all people from all areas, all sides, all extremes into that third way.
Sure. And to kind of skip ahead to next week's message, one of the things I'm going to point out is what Jesus says in verse 35. Your reward from heaven will be very great, and you will be truly acting as children of the Most High, for he is kind to those who are unthankful and wicked. And first, I want us to think about our own wickedness, our own ungratitude, our own brokenness, because when we do that, it helps us remember the fact that we've also been recipients of grace. And then I think what we're invited to do, to be compassionate as your Father is compassionate, is to begin to shift our lens and just look at these people that are just so frustrating and infuriating because if they stand against our purpose here, and just think, who does God see when he looks at them? Like, he loves them as much as he loves me.
Yeah.
He's wild about them. And if they truly are committing some kind of deep injustice or they're deeply misrepresenting him, it breaks his heart. And it should break ours as well. Rather than leading us to rage, it should lead us to sorrow, which would hopefully lead us to a place of praying that things would change with them. And so I don't know. It's the question. It's the question because you do kind of feel like maybe there's a line. Maybe after a certain point, it's okay to just go off. But I don't know that it is.
How will we know that it's working? So like the Pettis Bridge story,
Sure.
not that, and racial injustice is still prevalent
It's
today, but
not like over and
Yeah, right.
but
Yeah.
those people had a goal. Those people had they namely at that time
Voting
they
rights.
needed the voting rights
Right.
in place. So laws were getting passed. Like it accomplished something. And so not everything, because obviously racial injustice still persists. But what if we are to behave in a way that is different from the default as Christians, as the church, how will we know that it's working? Like, what are the signposts to look for? What are the signs to look for to be like, you're doing the right thing? This is the right way to go about this. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm asking?
Absolutely. Well, to start with the protesters, I love that Dr. King constantly used the phrase beloved community, because he understood that the end result of all of their labors was the formation of a beloved community. And for him, I think what that meant is a community that was made up, that was completely founded on and surrounded by love. And in his vision, as we all know from some of his more famous speeches, he envisioned a world where that beloved community was made up of not just people of different races, but also former segregationists and former oppressed people. Like he envisioned those people changing and becoming a part of this beloved community. And so that to me is one. We will know that this is working when we are moving towards a beloved community and not away from it. And so I think, to take a step even wider than that, I think this is where we look at the Sermon on the Mount and think about, or the Sermon on the Plain in Luke 6, and ask what kind of picture is Jesus painting? What kind of community is he envisioning? And if you really take a step back and look at it all, you in a community where the poor are blessed. Why? Because they are having their needs met by God's people, where hatred is replaced by love, where people are self-controlled, and where women are respected and cared for, instead of being just divorced willy-nilly. Like, these are the kinds of things he's depicting. And so to me, I think loving your enemies is one very crucial, but only one component of a broader vision of the type of beloved community that God is inviting us all into. And so I think we will see this start to work. We'll see this working when we see more and more people being swept up into this beautiful reality of a community that looks like the kingdom of God. So that's maybe a non-answer, but like, I think we'll see former enemies as friends. I think we'll see forgiveness become something that's far more common. I think we'll see rage being replaced by open-mindedness and understanding. And that seems, as I'm saying those words, it seems impossible.
Right.
Impossible. And yet that's what we're called to do and be. And so I know that we always talk about America as like a Christian nation, but when you look at the fruit of so much of American Christianity, it does not look like the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. And kindness, maybe missed one, I don't know. But like, it doesn't look like that in a lot of cases. And so I think we have a significant amount of work to do to get the church in our community, in our context, back to a fruit-bearing church that is focused not on giving in to the rage bait of our culture, but on recovering that beloved community that Jesus describes and that Martin Luther King describes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that is an answer.
That is definitely an answer.
You did say something, yes. Let's talk about training for a second.
Yeah.
Practice. So you said in your sermon, that if this seemingly impossible task is something Jesus actually expects us to put into practice, then how do we do it? How can we be different from the default? We practice, we train. So one of my questions was, how does somebody practically start training to love our enemies in everyday life, especially when when most people don't have a structured support system of the civil rights protesters at that time? So what are some specific actionable steps that we can take to train ourselves in our minds to love our enemies beyond just the general advice of like pray more or read your Bible? Like,
Right.
how do we train ourselves in this?
When you just said that, it sparked the civil rights movement. And I think we've talked around it and about it, and we're still working toward it. But I think there's a piece that Grace can be a piece, and I'm talking Grace Church, a piece of a discipleship movement.
Yeah.
And what is that going to look like as we move in the future? And how are we Grace Church a movement of discipleship that trains people in such a way that loving your enemies is a core piece of that, as well as all of the fruits of the Spirit
Mhm.
and all of the ways of discipleship? And I think we kind of have the plan there. It's how are we going to implement that now? But I think we individually are responsible in our own discipleship journey, our personal discipleship journey with the Lord. But I think we as a church are also responsible to provide those opportunities of growth and discipleship. When I was looking at the 10
Ten
commandments of
nonviolence.
nonviolence, like, wow, what a great mantra to be. And they were reminding themselves of that all the time. And it wasn't just Martin Luther King going home every night and reminding himself before he went to bed, hey,
That's right.
he was constantly in front of this movement, reminding them day after day. And I think we take it for granted sometimes that because we live in it in our heads, or as a
Mhm.
staff or pastors or whatever, that people are catching on. I would love, I mean, like, how many years did it take for this man to get this movement together and get the kind of,
Buy-in.
support and
Yeah.
buy-in for, but then it still was somewhat of a movement even when he was gone.
Mhm.
Like, are we building something that even when we're gone, the
Yeah.
movement will still exist? So
Right. And I think, Tyler, you mentioned like the support structures that they had. I think that's what discipleship is meant to look like, where there are multiple generations, where there's communities where people are engaging with one another throughout their lives and not just on Sunday mornings. Like that would be the dream of, if we could have that kind of a community. That's when people can start to do the different things that go beyond just reading your Bible, that actually get into. I used the metaphor of the marathon, but like I talked about, practicing giving up your own desires for the sake of God's desires. That could be what job you take. That could be what to do with your money. Like, there could be all kinds of different ways to do that, because that is the kind of thing that strengthens your trust muscles or your faith muscles, where you're learning how to trust God's desires than your own. And so then one day when you're encountering an enemy, it's not the most ridiculous thing to just trust what Jesus says and actually try it out, because you're used to trusting God and seeing the results of it. It could be just getting in a regular routine of caring for the marginalized, and using your time and energy and money to look out for the oppressed, and that's the kind of thing that shapes your heart to be more generous and more loving and more compassionate towards others who are in need. And suddenly that day comes along when you're encountering an enemy, and your heart is trained. You've got like compassion cardio, where you now have the stamina to be compassionate to someone that your mind tells you not to be. And so that's what it looks like. And I think having an older person or people speaking into your life and walking with you and shaping you and speaking truth, and that you actually listen to, like, that's the path to getting trained beyond just pray more,
Yeah.
right?
I think also just serving in general, like, for some people that are listening, just start serving once a week somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, I just had lunch with someone today that was like, she serves every week in 5th grade, small group, girls at Grace and she's leading that group now
Oh,
for
yeah.
camp. And she is like, I can't even tell you the joy that I'm experiencing just day one, because I already know these girls, and like,
Yeah.
I can just step in. It was actually really sweet this weekend. I went into the nursery to see Lou. That's Tyler's little girl.
Yeah.
Because she was crying so hard.
Yeah, she hates it there.
But the man that was taking care of her, he was like, oh, I know Lou, because he serves every weekend at 11. And he said, I've kind of missed her. I think they've been going to 9:15.
Yeah.
But I thought, what a beautiful example. That's kind of a thankless job. Like, you're just
Right.
holding babies that are crying for an hour while their parents go to church. But how beautiful that he's caught this vision of, like, it matters. Lou will never remember it, but she was calming down because there was a recognition there. And so I think like that idea of serving each other in community
Yeah.
is another piece of that. Just start doing it and you're going to find out that you will see fruit like pretty quickly.
Yeah. In general, the more others focused your actions become, the more easy it will be to think about the other instead of just yourself when you're encountering an enemy. I think that's totally right.
Yeah, because one of my questions was also like, okay, because we don't have this same type of structure systems, like they had people called like captains, follow your captain,
right?
Whatever. Who is our trainer? But you guys just kind of answered it. It's kind of like a mixture between we are our own trainer, we are each other's trainer. Obviously, Jesus is our trainer, and the church as a community should be training one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say just, I know we kind of dismissed it, but reading your Bible more, I don't think it needs to just be you alone in a room reading your Bible. One of the frankly best discipleship tools in my life of recent years has just been listening to the Bible Project podcast, where they go through and they just talk about the world behind the text and they talk about the meaning of the text and they reflect on how to live it out. And it's just like, it's just a regular part of my commute. It's a regular part of my week. And it is a opportunity where I'm shaping my mind around the teachings of Jesus or of scripture. And it's just become a part of my life that helps me think differently. And it's such a worthwhile thing. And there's plenty of others, but that's one that I would highly recommend.
Yeah.
I've just decided I'm not a good alone processor. I know that's shocking.
Yeah.
Are you looking for a sound bite of me somewhere in there? But I think getting together with somebody else and just like reading scripture and just talking about it. I'm so like, it could be a little book club for you. Like just read a passage and talk about it. But I'm so much better when I have somebody else. I have better ideas and I get things better when I'm talking to somebody else and I'm bouncing those ideas off them and they're bound like that's, I think.
Yeah, that works.
There's all sorts of ways.
All right. Last question. So we live in a, I don't know, world where the systems that we have to live by are secular. So if my neighbor puts a fence in my yard, I could sue him. Or if he refuses to move the fence, I could sue him to get him to do what I need him to do, right? I've been a part of situations where people say, you need to take legal action for this thing. So we live in a world where legal action is a very, very much a reality for a lot of different situations.
Right.
Family issues, divorce, but also like suing people for things. So one of my core questions is, how do you love enemies? Because if you're taking legal action against somebody, I imagine it's possible that they are your enemy.
Right.
How do you love them in a world where this is our reality?
Sure. Well, two thoughts on that. One, there is some pretty direct biblical wisdom, specifically from the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians, where he kind of says, don't sue fellow believers. So first of all, if it's someone else in the church, if it's a fellow believer, now there's so much I could talk about the world behind the text to say that should not just be directly applied. There are definitely exceptions, but the basic idea is like, you have a church, you have church leaders, you have all go, if you can do it through non-legal means, don't put the affairs of fellow brothers and sisters in Christ in the hands of secular authorities. That's kind of his point. But there is definitely a bigger question of, okay, well, what about someone outside the church or from another church or whatever, where that's not really, an option. And this gets to one of the points that I'm probably going to make this final week, or my final week before Dad and Tim come to teach, but week 3 is, maybe instead of giving a declarative answer, I would ask a question. If that neighbor is putting their fence up in the wrong place and you want to sue them, what would a very unexpected thing be that you could do to short circuit the ordinary plan of attack? And like, this of course depends on the actual neighbor being a little hostile. If they were completely if they didn't know and you sued them, that would be one thing. But like, let's just assume you've got a hostile neighbor that intentionally built their fence over the line. I don't know the answer, but I'm asking what would be a really unexpected way to just change the narrative and knock them off balance? Like, oh, that's not what I expected them to do, but it's done with love. Like, what would that be? I don't know the answer, but that's the kind of question I think we need to be asking. Is there something I could be doing? I could fight back.
Yeah.
I could just sit there and take it and lose 2 feet of my property, or I practice a third way.
Yeah.
And what's that third way?
Because the third way isn't always obvious.
Right.
And you have to think really hard about what that would be.
Right.
We have been dealing with a real life example that happened right in the middle of this sermon series, and we are actually using the messages and the teachings to try to sort through. One of our kids was pretty wronged, and we are trying to decide how we need to go about, number one, equipping our kid to do their own adulting.
Yeah.
But then also guiding them as they navigate. They've been wronged, and you could probably take legal action if you wanted to, but what is the right way to go about this? And so it has been very helpful to be in the middle of it. And of course, it's no mistake that we're in the middle of this going through. And as mom and dad wanting to step in
Sure.
and go,
Right.
what do the kids say? Scorched earth on somebody, or is that?
Kids say that?
I don't know.
think so. I say that. I say that a
The
lot.
kids definitely don't say
I don't
that.
think kids say
okay.
that. That's
Go ham. I think my kids have
Sure.
said go
Oh,
ham.
sure.
On something. But
I don't think they say that.
but we, Jeff and I have had to talk about
Yeah.
how do we, number one, help ourselves navigate this so that
Right.
we in turn can help our child
Yeah.
navigate how to go through this. So it's been really timely. And if I come to any really great conclusions, I'll let you all know.
yeah.
We're-
Let us know.
We're navigating it as we go.
Right. And I do just want to because I do want to say sort of the ordinary caveat that there are obviously
Right.
certain situations where if you are being abused or taken advantage of, or like there is no scenario in which Jesus desires you to come to unjust harm just because like there are times when you need to get out of that situation or
Right.
you need to take help because you're not supposed to be a doormat either. So let's remember the third way is not to just be
Right.
a doormat.
Right.
It's something different.
Yeah.
So that I just want to throw that out there because I don't want it to make it seem like, again, that we're also to just kind of like sit back
Take it.
and be abused. That's not the case. But there is a third way. And that's the invitation is, can we think of, how do we think creatively about what might be something that we could do that would short circuit the ordinary tit for tat hate filled.
You could like plant trees underneath the fence so
And then
that
they
like
start destroying it.
yeah, so like in a couple years it
Yeah.
destroys the fence.
There you go. Or you plant trees on their side of the fence where it's still your property, and then they could sue you,
Yeah.
and then you could have the lawsuit dismissed by.
And then they look bad.
there you go.
Right.
That's
Problem
the third
solved.
way.
I do like number 2 of the commandments of nonviolent violence. Remember always that the nonviolent movement seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. So we shouldn't at the end of the day be standing up like we win.
Yeah.
But justice and reconciliation together are the right thing. And sometimes justice is a different way of approaching it. It might be that legal action is the way to go about something if justice and reconciliation are the end goal. And
Sure.
you might be able to find that even through a legal situation. So
I had someone else, friend of the pod, contact me this past weekend saying, I feel like we're just kind of scratching the surface in these sermons, and it's really important to listen to this podcast because maybe you did say like, here, let me give a caveat, abuse, like,
Yeah.
you
I
did
didn't.
the first
we
week.
don't-
You did the first week, I thought you said something. about
Maybe.
The
But
doormat.
we do that here,
conversation.
and I
Yeah.
think that's one of the values of having this
Yeah, I agree.
channel is to
Yeah, I
be able
think
to
we
dig
need.
a little
Do we
deeper.
keep reminding people on Sundays that we have? I don't.
There's like slides and stuff.
Yeah, we used to sometimes say it like, "Hey,
Yeah,
if you
maybe
want
it's
more,"
time.
I think we should probably remind people.
Yeah.
If you want more, dig deeper during the week.
Yeah, I'll do
Don't
that.
forget.
I'll do that this week. That's a good idea.
Speaking of this weekend, where are we going next? What are we doing?
Well, I kind of already gave away most of my main points, but
I really feel like you just hey, We could just shut it down this week.
Yeah.
Because
do it.
we're going to be
Take a break.
tired after
Cancel.
camp.
Yeah.
We've already discussed it.
Now, verses 35 and 36, my hope is that I can give 3 or 4 kind of very practical points to kind of remember, maybe some questions to ask in a different situation. I would love to actually have people do a mental exercise with a specific enemy or category of enemies in their mind, and then go through some sort of evaluation questions. So it'll be very kind of very personal, and I'm actually hoping to kind of maybe give a little bit of a time at the end to do some more repentance or thinking or asking for the Spirit's guidance or something. I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
Yeah.
It's kids camp week.
I think that's good because this is a sermon series where I feel like it'd be very easy for all of us to be like, I hope so-and-so here's these messages. You know, I hope my enemy is listening.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that'll be good. A little personal reflection.
Always good.
Yep. All right. We'll be back next week. Amy, are you ready?
I
You
am
wanna
so ready. I'm ready.
Do the honors.
Because I don't want to do it wrong.
You have it written out.
No.
You just have the Bible in front of
I
you.
do.
All right. Will you please send us out?
Do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God.
And we'll see you on the other side of Sunday.